Welcome to the Crossview podcast. To our audience, you're joining us wherever you're joining us from, YouTube, Spotify, all the different platforms. I'm here with Aaron, and as very familiar with, and you probably see if you're watching the video, we also have a guest with us that we're very appreciative to have, Mr. Peter Sonski, presidential candidate for the American Solidarity Party. Peter, how are you doing?
I'm great, Marcus, and consider it a pleasure and a distinct privilege to be joining you and Aaron tonight. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, we
Awesome.
deeply appreciate having you on the podcast. Like I mentioned before we even started recording, you're definitely bringing the level of podcast up. That we have a presidential candidate for our small podcast, and I know our audience definitely appreciates it as well. It's I personally enjoy just everyday people engaging in the political process, and not just thinking it's too big for them or outside of scope for them, for the average American. So to be able to have this conversation with you is a big deal for me, and I really appreciate it. And I feel the same about, I'm sure our audience feels the same as well.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah. Awesome. So if we just like to start with just asking you to kick it off by telling us who you are, where you're from, a little bit about yourself, and if you could give us a quick testimony of how you came to faith as well, that'd be great.
Sure, absolutely. So, my name again is Peter Sonski. I am a native of New England. I live now in Connecticut, was born in Massachusetts, have lived in this Northeast region pretty much all of my life, spent some time in Washington, went to school in Washington, D.C., had both my graduate and undergraduate degrees from the Catholic University in Washington, and I worked in Washington for going on 8 years. So I know my way around the district, but I am the average guy. You mentioned that it's not too common that you see someone who is entering the political sphere, especially at this level, that is someone who is much like yourself, and that is what my ambition is. Marcus, Aaron, we are facing a presidential campaign a year from now that is likely to pit Joe Biden and Donald Trump together, at least if you listen to the polls. And that's the same option that we had as voters 4 years ago. And candidly, I think many people in the United States were frustrated with the choices they had offered them. 300 million people in the United States, and Democrats, Republicans, this is the best you can offer me. And if we're faced with that again, I think that frustration is going to be at a very high ebb. What's different is that most people still haven't come to accept the reality of a third party being a player in politics. We have this paradigm, this tunnel vision that it can only be two parties. It's what we've known all our lifetimes. Republicans, Democrats, red and blue. And unfortunately, it's not all that is. And certainly in other regions of the world, it's not all it is. There can be successful ways to govern that is not just a duopoly, a two-party system. But you asked how I came into the faith. I'm a cradle Catholic, brought up in the faith. But like so many, I had a period of time where I kind of in my late teens, early 20s, kind of didn't place as much value in the practice of my faith. And after being married and raising children, I had a reversion, a real renewal in faith, a new insight that look, I have a huge responsibility as a spouse and as a parent, and I need to rely on something beside myself in order both to sustain me and to guide me. And that was a real realization for me that has stayed with me and has given me purpose and direction for 40 years.
Yeah, that's good. Wow. That's awesome. Yeah, I think you're right. We all have had that experience where, we Aaron and we've both said we came to faith pretty young. I think Aaron, you said you were like about 4 or 5, and I think I was about 6. So we both kind of similar to you, call it a cradle Catholic, call ourselves, I guess, cradle Christians. But we all go through life and journey through it, and you just realize, run into a few brick walls, and You realize you can't do this without him, fully depending on him. So,
Yeah.
yeah, and then you kind of just lean in a little bit more. And I think Aaron and I have both found that to be true for ourselves. Aaron, you're going to ask the next question here.
So this one is, I guess, more about the party. How did you come to find out about the American Solidarity Party? And I guess once you found out about it, what drew you to it, to where now you are obviously the face of it, basically?
Sure. Aaron, if you'd permit me, I'll take you back even a little farther. When I first graduated high school and was eligible to vote, I was a Democrat. I grew up in a blue household. My parents were, blue collar class of people, and that's what I knew growing up. But remember, this is growing up in the 1960s and 70s. When I was first eligible to vote, I was a Democrat, and voted for Jimmy Carter. And then obviously Carter lost to Ronald Reagan. And also at this time, there was a real decided movement between the pro-life faction of people and the pro-abortion faction of people. And it seems like Reagan really did a lot to consolidate the pro-lifers, and the Democrats did a lot to consolidate the pro-abortion folks. And that's kind of where I had the falling out with the Democratic Party. I say I didn't leave the party; they left me, because I think there's a lot that the Democratic Party stands for that it still resonates with me. But if it can't be holistic, then I can't accept it, because I think there's some intellectual honesty that's lacking there. So I was a Reagan Democrat for a while, and then I became a Reagan Republican. But when I became a Republican, I just realized that this didn't feel right. It wasn't who I was either. I was trying to kind of find my way along with a path of other people that had some views that we shared in common, but there wasn't enough. And so I said goodbye to the Republican Party back in sometime in the 1990s, and I was kind of a sojourner for a long time, trying to find something that made sense to me, and I would vote for candidates who I thought best represented my views, and that didn't always include major party candidates. In 2016 and in 2020, I did not vote for a major party candidate for president. It was 2018, Aaron, that I came to learn of the American Solidarity Party.
Okay.
I had been searching, I had been looking for something that I felt was a better representation of my views. A friend introduced me to the ASP, and just in conversation, sharing the frustrations of fellow Catholic man, I just said, look, I don't feel as though I can adequately identify with either one of these parties. It's been really difficult to go in, hold my nose, and vote, because I feel compelled to vote, but at the same time, I don't feel very excited about the choices that I have.
Yeah.
He introduced me to the ASP, and it fit me like a glove, fellas. It was like a perfect expression of the values that I had. Pro-life for the whole life, meaning not just protecting the child in the womb, but also respecting the elderly, respecting the person who is on death row, maybe because he didn't have adequate defense or didn't have the resources to have adequate defense, maybe committed the most heinous crime that you can imagine, but still has human dignity. That doesn't go away because you do something wrong. And look, this is what my campaign is about: raising human dignity. We had just a short time ago a racial killing in Jacksonville, Florida. Heinous, heinous. Young man goes in and targets 3 black people, and perhaps more had he had opportunity to do so. And he had these very hateful expressions on social media before that. Where in our society does this enter? Why can we not respect that every human life has dignity? Every human life deserves to be respected and protected. And so it's respect for the worker who is not getting necessarily a fair shake, not both in wages as well as sometimes being treated just like he's another piece of the raw materials that's part of the production process. When it comes to um, uh, people who are in need of health care and can't access it, are we doing all that we can to provide them with proper health care that recognizes their dignity from the public sector? I mean, there's so many deficiencies, and it really speaks to a lack of concern for human dignity. And so that's what I personally am about, trying to raise that level. And I think, the president can't push a button and automatically change these things, but a president can lead. He can set a tone. How often do we hear when there is a mass shooting, I want to say human life is valuable, human life must be respected, human life must be protected? What do we hear? We hear, oh, we've got to ban this gun, or oh, we've got to give more mental health treatment, whatever it is coming from either side of the equation. But nobody says human life is valuable. Human life must be loved and respected and upheld and sustained. And these are things that I think so many in our society have an understanding or an agreement with, but it doesn't stay in the forefront of our minds. And people manifest themselves in the most horrible ways, disrespecting other people, even to the extent of killing them.
Right.
Long answer. I apologize.
No, that's really good. I appreciate the depth there. I think you mentioned that you feel like the Democrat Party back when you were a Democrat really had left you. And then you just kind of went on and told us about how it's really the morality and the lack of human dignity. And I know you also mentioned the Republican Party also kind of doing the same thing. But I guess I also just want to ask, do you feel like the Democratic Party has also left you from an economic standpoint in terms of how they believe the economy should work and things like that?
No. In fact, as I think I said, there's many things in the Democratic Party that I agree with. The thing that disappoints me the most is the position and the very strident position that they hold on abortion. Because it's, as I think I said, it's intellectually dishonest. I mean, how can you tell me that you want to improve education? How can you tell me that you want to improve healthcare? How can you tell me that you want to improve the environment? How can you tell me that you want to secure children in school, make them safe in schools? Because if you're telling me that, you're telling me that all of these things are valuable to human beings. But at the same time, you're speaking out of the other side of your mouth when you say a child in the womb is not worth protecting. And that's why I say it's not intellectually honest.
Right.
You've got to be able to speak in harmony. And obviously, on the other side of the fence, that's the case too. They may say, I uphold the dignity of the child in the womb, but do you uphold the dignity of the laborer? All of these things, have to be consistent. We have to be able to say that every person in every walk of life has a need, and that has got to be observed regardless of the circumstances and regardless of your personal preferences. Human life has value. I got off the track, Marcus, and I apologize for that. But the economic positions of the Democratic Party in many ways still do appeal. I support the fact that they're trying to provide health care for people who legitimately are without health care. I support many of the programs that they put forth in support of laborers. These are initiatives that I think are valuable. The president introduced not too long ago the fact that he was going to be able to have Medicare bargained for the price of prescription drugs, which is going to help so many Americans with lower drug costs. I'm sad that it won't perhaps take effect for another couple of years, but I think it's a step in the right direction. So,
Sure.
yes, to be sure, there are definitely issues that I feel in alignment with on the Democratic side, but at the same time, I feel like they have a huge deficiency.
Okay. No, it's totally understandable. Thank you. Now, this is a bit of a pivot. Aaron, do you want to ask this next question?
Number 3.
Yeah.
So, as we're speaking, what is this? We're almost September 2023.
Yep.
There's been some murmuring, some talks of a possible another COVID situation, and so knowing what we've gone through the last couple of years and things that have happened and all that, I guess the question kind of is, what is your position on how you would handle lockdowns or mandates or restrictions in this type of a situation? Because most people, would believe that what we saw with COVID 2020, 2021, they don't think that's the only time we're going to deal with that in the near future. So they want to know how a future president would deal with something like that again.
Well, first of all, I agree, Aaron, that probably COVID is not something that we can just say has gone by. I imagine that it'll be around for a long time. But I think from the experience that we've all lived through that was a very poor choice of words. There are many people that died as a result of COVID. The experience that many of us have felt over, let's say, the past 3 years, at least 2.5 years from the time that the COVID lockdowns were first introduced. There's been a huge impact. First of all, I think we've learned enough individually as well as collectively as a nation to know that the regulations, the restrictions that were imposed were not all successful in arresting the spread of the disease, and that trying to implement the same type of restrictions again is not going to have a positive effect. So I think there's a lot of people that are still certainly in favor of vaccinations and boosters and that sort of thing. But I think the masking, I think distancing, I think the cohorting, I think the closing of the schools and forcing students to learn in virtual or hybrid environments all have proved to be hugely detrimental in so many other ways, in societal ways that linger even now after we're removed from those restrictions for many months, if not a year plus. So I certainly would not be in favor of imposing mandatory restrictions like sending people home, mandatory restrictions like masking in public. I think it's certainly a situation where people feel still today that they need to either protect themselves or to protect others, and they're continuing to wear masks, and I respect that completely. I think there are still people that have adopted practices where they are limiting the exposure that they have to public settings, and I respect that as well. I don't think that's going to go away. I think that's something that has shaped the way each of us views our circumstances. So, to be sure, I would work with health officials, but I would be very reticent because of the harmful effects that some of these restrictions caused our society that are continuing to be felt, to impose the same types of restrictions that were imposed on us in 2020.
Gotcha. So along with that, the idea of, I know, especially from the conservative perspective, a lot of people have an issue with it seems like unelected, or they it's phrased like this: unelected people seemingly making the uh, uh, what's the word I'm looking for?
Policies.
Yeah, making the policies for how we should, how we were supposed to live during that time. A lot of people were like, we didn't elect you, we didn't vote for you, but the people we did elect are just going along with whatever you say. That doesn't sit right with us. And so I know a lot of people had a big problem still have a big problem with that from that angle. So I guess what are your thoughts on that? And then I have I guess another question with you talked a lot about the social distancing and lockdowns and schools and masking. Uh, but also I would want to know your position on the vaccines, in terms of government pressure on corporations or on businesses to push it, because we know the government didn't necessarily push it themselves, but they kind of put businesses and corporations in a position, or airports and things like that, to where like they had to do it, and so it restricted travel and all those types of things. So I guess that is definitely something too people would want to hear you talk about.
Absolutely. Well, I think to the first part of your question, I'm not a medical man. I don't have any medical expertise whatsoever. So I certainly would seek the counsel of people who have knowledge of infectious diseases, who have knowledge of this type of illness and the potential for this type of illness to do harm to individuals and society in general. But at the same time, I think I would, especially having the benefit of having gone through the experiences, have a much more measured approach than I did before. I'm not defending the decisions that were made, because I certainly didn't like them. I abided by them, but I certainly didn't like them when they were imposed. But there was a great deal of panic throughout the nation and throughout the world. There was a great deal of, I'll call it ignorance, but I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I simply mean that we didn't know what we were dealing with. This was a new virus that was largely unknown. We didn't know how severe it was, how rapidly it was going to spread. You saw us kind of learning as the process went on. But we have a great deal of medical advancement on how to treat the condition now. We have a great deal of knowledge about how it spreads and how to arrest it, or better arrest it. So I think that all of that would come to bear in any decisions that we made. And I think the public in general is much more informed than it was at the time that COVID was new. So I think it would be much easier for a public official to make these decisions today as a result of having fresh knowledge, the experience of all of these things, and also having a little bit of skepticism when it comes to medical advice that is about something completely unknown. I think now we would expect that there was going to be much more factual knowledge about this particular virus. The second part of your question, you were talking about virus mandates. Is that or vaccination mandates?
Yeah, the idea of vaccine mandates, or not necessarily, because the government was able to do it in a way where they weren't quote unquote forcing vaccines, but they also kind of were. So again, what would be your approach to how you'd want to do that?
Well, I'm not in favor of vaccine mandates. I certainly am in favor of people voluntarily wanting to secure a vaccine for themselves, a booster for themselves, if this is what they believe is going to help protect their health and the health of others around them. But I'm not in favor of mandating it. I think there were many people in conscience that wanted to avoid taking the vaccine, and their views should have been respected. It was all very new and arguably very experimental. To be sure, we've learned a lot, and at the same time, I think there are still people today who feel as though they don't want to be instructed to take something that is against their free will, their conscience. I agree with you, Aaron. There were some that felt, if not forced, at least compelled
Yeah.
by public opinion. You should get. Why aren't you making an appointment to get the vaccine? But there were a lot of people that I encountered. I mean, people who I would consider reasonable, rational people, who were just looking in far and wide to see where they could go as fast as they could to get the
Yeah.
vaccine. There was a great deal of panic. So I respect that too. But I'm not one that would compel people by the power of government to take a vaccine that was against their own conscience or their own desire for managing their health.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah, that's good. Now, another thing that's been kind of talked about recently, a hot topic, is immigration, specifically at the southern border. No one seems to really have a great solution for what's going on at the southern border. First, I'd like to just ask you, do you think this is a problem? How do you think it's impacting Americans? And then second, what would your approach be to this particular issue?
That's a Pandora's box. Do I think it's a problem? Absolutely.
Sure,
I mean, to deny that is ridiculous. But
you
there's
have to know the
so
answer.
many components. There's so many components to this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I say it's a Pandora's box. I say it with respect because I think that it's not an issue that I can just, even in 5 minutes time, be able to
Sure.
enunciate enough to say this is how the problem should be solved.
Mm-hmm.
How I see it. Yes, we have a crisis. Yes, there are, I think, practical short-term ways that we can address it. The best long-term way, obviously, is to force Congress to get together and put together some meaningful legislation for how they are going to address immigrants seeking to enter our nation, enter across our borders legally. We've got to have Congress do that because they have dragged their feet and been unwilling to do so. But in the short term, obviously we need to do a couple of things. We need to protect our sovereignty. We need to be able to make sure that we are preventing the wrong element from coming into the country. We need to be able to make sure that drug lords and cartels and human traffickers and individuals who are coming here for unlawful and harmful reasons are stopped and apprehended if at all possible. At the same time, we need to recognize that there are people who legitimately are seeking and are deserving of opportunity to enter our country. And in so many cases, they are being forced to deal with long waits and other conditions that are very difficult, which makes them want to work around the legal system. I don't endorse that, but at the same time, I recognize that the frustration and the fear and the need that a human has in order for security and safety is such that they will do some things that are extreme in order to secure them. We can definitely do better managing people at the border. We can definitely send more immigration judges down. We can definitely send more border patrols down. Just hire more people. We're a big government. We have a lot of potential to hire more people and to implement more people down there to manage the number of people that are legitimately seeking to cross. And at the same time, let's enhance the ways that we're patrolling the border. There's a lot of electronic capabilities that we have today that we haven't enjoyed for years and decades previous to this that we can implement to protect that sovereignty that I mentioned, to protect the safety of our citizens, with trafficking of humans, trafficking of fentanyl, trafficking of other forms of drugs, and just overall vice. We can look for better ways to improve that. But Congress has got to act. The president can implement some changes, but Congress really has to identify how we are going to address this issue in a larger and more long-term and appropriate manner. And that's what I would do. I would bring the leaders of Congress together and say, ladies and gentlemen, we got a problem, and nothing else is more important today than you're getting together and putting together some meaningful remedies to the situation we have.
That's good.
Yeah, no, see, that's a good 5-minute answer. We'll take that. We'll definitely take that. So, speaking of a strong and sovereign border, I think of places like Israel, and kind of use that to pivot into kind of asking you about just a general view of foreign policy. So it's become a big thing in the news recently, in the culture and politics sphere. Recently, we watched the debate last week, the GOP debate, and one of the guys that we've been interested in really hearing from was Vivek Ramaswamy, and we saw an exchange that he had with Nikki Haley, and it really showed his weakness in regard to foreign policy, and of course, Nikki Haley's expertise really is foreign policy. So
Former UN ambassador, you picked the wrong person to fight with.
For sure. Exactly. And so, it really, he's been getting a lot of questions, a lot of pushback now since he had said some things. And one of the specific things he had said was that, quote, it would be a success if by 2028, Israel were independent of the U.S. financially and our U.S. aid to Israel, while, of course, still having a close relationship with them as an ally. What are your thoughts on the U.S.-Israel relationship, and also generally your approach to foreign relations with other allied nations? Because Vivek got a lot of pushback for that. But if I can kind of throw my 2 cents in there, it sounds to me that would be the point of financial aid to other countries, is that they would eventually become independent. And so I just generally kind of want to hear, do you think this is like perpetual financial aid that we should be giving to other countries in our foreign policy, or could you just speak to that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, we've enjoyed a long and positive relationship with Israel, and as a democracy in the Middle East, I think that that's something that we need to maintain. That's not to say that we don't strive to have the best diplomatic relations with Palestine and with other Islamic nations around there, but Israel as a democracy has an affinity and akin. They're like us in that they're self-governed, and that they're striving to showcase that style of governance in that region of the world that we think is the best way forward. Like Vivek Ramaswamy, I would certainly like the fact that they would not be dependent upon the United States forever. I think 2028 is really ambitious and unrealistic. But that being said, to your point, Marcus, yes, it would be great if we're providing aid, that we're providing aid to give them the hand up, right? And so that's certainly a noble ambition. In terms of, I mean, you didn't ask specifically about Russia and Ukraine, but I'll happily share with you my views on that conflict. I mean, I plainly think that Russia is in the wrong, that they attacked a sovereign nation, that they are trying to claim land from Ukraine that is, part of Ukraine's territory. They are attacking innocent civilians, and I am completely appalled by this. I certainly don't want to engage, as the United States, our military, in war against Russia. So I have been in favor from the very outset, humanitarian aid for Ukraine, defensive military aid for Ukraine, sanctions for Russia, and diplomatic efforts as much as possible to bring the conflict to an end. The situation isn't improving. We continue to provide the aid that I mentioned to Ukraine. I think we must continue. We must support the Ukrainian people so that they can protect themselves and protect their national sovereignty, and not be overrun by Putin's Russian army.
So would it be safe to say that the very early approach that this administration took with saying, yes, we will give you, like you said, the aid to defend yourself, but there were restrictions around how you were using these weapons or weapons, whether, again, to be offensive or defensive. Now, we've seen they've kind of switched up on that and have over time have loosened a bit,
Right.
but it seems like you were okay with defensive aid, but not necessarily anything that was provoking more action.
Exactly. I think what they have done in their counteroffensive, Marcus, has been largely their own technology or their own provisions from perhaps other allies. But as far as I'm concerned, I want to definitely do everything that I can to help them protect themselves, while at the same time not escalating the war.
Right. Okay.
I guess this is just an additional question kind of going along with international affairs, kind of a curveball. What were your thoughts on what happened with Afghanistan a couple years ago and the pullout from there?
Well, I mean, in retrospect, we can obviously say that it was handled very poorly. And the loss of life and the terrible outcome is still a very sour point. Yes, like I'm sure the president, maybe both Trump and Biden wanted to remove American troops from Afghanistan. They didn't want a situation that was lingering, a long, drawn-out affair and intervention in other parts of the world like we experienced in Vietnam and Korea and other places. So I respect the fact that we don't want American troops in, shall we say, high conflict areas. I accept the fact that occasionally American troops will be part of UN peacekeeping forces that will go in and try to stabilize the situation. But at least in those cases, they are part of a multinational force. It's not the United States exclusively that's there. So I think that in efforts like that, we can work with other nations to try to stabilize situations that threaten the safety and integrity of people, then we should work in collaboration with them. But the honest answer was there was a desire to exit Afghanistan, and it was executed very poorly. I think if the president was honest with himself, he would admit that, but I don't think it's a very popular topic.
Sure.
That's for sure. So we'll go on to some of the more common moral issues in American society. And so I guess what your main thoughts would be on topics like abortion, gay marriage, transgenderism. Especially people are worried about what's going on with adolescent transgenderism and what seems to be like we have all these restrictions in society for kids not to be able to do things, but then when it comes to sex change, that tends to be okay from a higher standpoint. What would be, or what do you think is the role of the federal government and the president in things like those topics?
Well, I definitely think that we have to take the benefit of society into consideration and enact laws that are going to protect people from harm. I think there are plenty of circumstances where some of these things that you're discussing are being introduced and promoted for profit. Let's be honest. Talk about abortion. I think that there are agencies out there that are providers of abortion that are doing it to profit by it. We've heard reports of agencies selling body parts. We've heard reports of these late-term abortions. We had a case that was tried that just concluded this week with some individuals that found something on the order of 100 or 115, I think was the number of aborted children, aborted bodies. And these are heinous acts that are going on, and obviously there's a great deal of people that are supporting it, and they're getting provided funds for their election campaigns by providers of abortion. So naturally they're gonna defend it because there's self-interest there. I think the same is true with some of the surgery that you were discussing, Aaron, with regard to youngsters. I mean, they are permanently mutilating human bodies, whether it's physically, surgically, or chemically through drugs. To the case where some of these are completely unalterable. If a youngster goes through some sort of surgical procedure, I mean, there's no turning back. And these are very young individuals who are obviously not mature enough to be making decisions of this magnitude at an age that they are, and yet they are being supported and actually being encouraged to pursue this type of action. Can we not accept that there are people who are benefiting financially from this type of action? I oppose it, and I would support any legislation that prohibited any kind of chemical, drug treatments, or surgical interventions on anyone below the age of 18. The age that we as a society have decided is the age of majority, of being able to manage your own affairs. If somebody who's over 18 wants to pursue elective treatment, then I certainly don't agree that it is in the interest of their health. I don't agree that it's in agreement. I don't agree that it is in keeping with their created dignity and created purpose. But at the same time, I wouldn't enforce legislation that prohibited them from pursuing that. But for minors, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, understood.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
Yeah. So speaking of youth, if we can for a moment talk about education, there are definitely a number of people in the country who feel upset, mainly on the right, about things that are going on in our public schools, whether they claim CRT or again this gender ideology being pushed kind of in the public school system. Of course, there's a debate whether that's happening or not. We actually had someone on the podcast that just recently graduated high school and told us his experience with some of the things that were indeed being pushed within the public school system. But even aside from that, I think it's safe to say that I don't think the public school system is doing our youth the best that it could be. I don't know if it's really preparing them for the most productive life and participation in our society. Do you have thoughts on how our current public school education, the way it is? What would you do to kind of address some of these things, if you even acknowledge that there are some issues here as we see it as it currently stands?
Sure. Again, a lot to the subject.
Okay.
First of all, in general terms, I agree that there are a number of issues we see regularly or hear regularly in the news media and from people with whom we converse, we relate, that there are problems in the schools. And I think that to a degree, there is validity to this. I don't think it's universal. I think there are certainly school districts where it's extremely problematic, and I think that there are probably regions of the country that it is very problematic, but I think that there are probably places where it's somewhat stable and acceptable. But in general, we have a public system of education that has profited our nation substantially. I mean, I don't know about you fellows, but I'm the product of public education. At least until my college, I went to a private college, but I went through public education up through high school, and I think that it has benefited the nation substantially. And I think it's a system that we should respect and try to reform as much as possible. Now, one of the things that I don't favor is I don't favor the big top-down direction for education. I'm very in favor, and you may have been leading along these lines, Marcus, of giving parents an awful lot of authority on the what their children are experiencing in school, both in terms of the academics as well as the social environment and the formation, and as well as the education of their being. But I also think that the best way to approach that is by allowing education to be developed and implemented on a much more local level. Let's do away with the U.S. Department of Education. Let's return education to the people. Let's allow local boards of education, and even I'm talking, county boards as opposed to state boards, have real autonomy in deciding what it is that their students are learning in school, how they're learning it. There probably ought to be some universal standards, like the length of the school year and the exposure to X number of years of history and mathematics and what have you. But at the same time, let's give the people in the locale that the students are being educated the authority and the responsibility to decide what it is their children learn. And parents have got to buy in. Parents have got to take a more active role. We have to acknowledge too that there are a number of parents that are very hands-off with this. My kids are going to school, and we live in a community that has a good school, and that's all I'm concerned about, is that our property values are high because our kids are getting good grades. But no, you've got to take a more earnest interest in the welfare of your students, both in what they're learning intellectually as well as what they are internalizing emotionally and morally. I mean, in my worldview, the parent is the child's first and foremost teacher. I may ask you, Marcus, as a pastor, to help in the formation of my child's spiritual growth. I may ask you, Aaron, as my child's math teacher, history teacher, to assist in the formation of his or her intellectual growth. But I want to be the one that is overseeing that and taking care that it is being delivered and internalized in a productive way for my children's long-term benefit.
So that sounds like you would be in favor of school choice. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. I don't feel that public schools should have the exclusive privilege of educating our children. I think there is certainly a place for public education, but I definitely endorse parents' choice in selecting the education that they deem appropriate for their children, including homeschooling.
Yep.
Now, you mentioned homeschooling. Now, my girlfriend actually homeschools her 5-year-old daughter. And so, we were listening to, I believe, Vivek Ramaswamy again, who had mentioned that perhaps the government should be providing some type of, I don't know what you call it, some type of benefit financially to be able to do that. Is that something you think the federal government should be involved in, or would you just stay out of that?
Well, I don't know how much you've learned about the American Solidarity Party in your research prior to this. One of the things that the ASP stands for is subsidiarity. Subsidiarity is a big and to many unfamiliar term, but it basically means that what I just spoke about, that the level of government that should have the most authority is that level of government closest to the people that's competent to do it. So education is one plainly that I think a local school district or a county school authority has competency to decide what it is that the children can adequately learn. I don't think it needs to come from a national level. Now, national defense, interstate commerce, I mean, obviously the county's not going to be involved with that. That's something that has to be handled at a federal level. But, correction systems, well, maybe that's something that needs to be handled at a state level. But you see where I'm going? I think that we need to be able to give authority to people at the lowest possible level of competence. It's closest to the people so that the people actually have the opportunity to manifest themselves in the making of those decisions. I'm an elected official now. I've been elected locally, and the people entrust me as their elected representative with their authority to make decisions. And I like the fact that being a local official, I can know my constituents, I can hear from my constituents, and I can live in the midst of my constituents so that I have a keen understanding of the circumstances and feel as though I am making a very informed and responsible action when I'm voting on their behalf. I think that there's a level of disconnect that increases the farther you get removed from this community level. And certainly our U.S. representatives, our U.S. Senators are the farthest away from that, yet they're making some decisions that impact people right in their homes.
Right. That's really good. All right. Well, Peter, as we kind of wrap up, we would love to go through some of these rapid fire questions. I'll let Aaron kind of run through those real quick, and then we'll give you an opportunity at the end, again, just to kind of give your final pitch for your candidacy.
Yeah. So question number one, what would be your top one or two priorities as soon as you enter, first 100 days, every candidate, typically will give like, oh, I wanted to get this done day one, get this done, first 100 days. Have you thought about things in that way? And if you have, what would be your top one or two?
Sure. Well, there's a number of executive orders that President Biden has implemented that are what I will call anti-life, pro-abortion, that I would roll back. And there are some that he rolled back that were very pro-life that I would re-implement. So that would be one of the first actions. We talked about the immigration crisis. That's something that we cannot allow to fester. I would bring together congressional leaders and insist that this is a topic that needs action. It doesn't need any more heel dragging. We've got to get that situation identified as to how we will keep our nation safe, but also allow access to people who legitimately have an interest in being here and really, in so many ways, can benefit us by being here. Let's be honest, guys. I mean, in my generation, there were people that were going to trade school and that were learning some jobs that are no longer common. And there are a lot of people out there that need blue collar labor that can't find help. And we have either seasonal or permanent immigrants that are handling a lot of those manual labor type of jobs. So it is a benefit to our society. We are, as a nation, not sustaining ourselves. Our birth rate is diminishing, and we need the people in order to sustain ourselves. We need the workers. Look, I'm a father of 9 kids. So I have, I think, tried to support myself and my own Social Security by raising 9 kids that hopefully are going to be contributing to Social Security for my benefit in the coming years. But, if we're going to continue to have a declining birth rate and not be admitting other people in here that are going to help in solving that problem, I'm going to be in a tough situation, and you guys may be SOL.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
9 kids.
Yeah.
Wow. That's you're a blessed man.
Yeah.
I am. I truly am. I'm blessed in many ways.
Yeah, we'll go with the next one.
Yeah. So, a buddy of ours, Andy, his question is essentially, if someone's already open to voting for third party, and again, breaking up this duopoly as we currently see it, the question really is, why should they support maybe the ASP, the American Solidarity Party, versus maybe a larger third party like the Libertarian Party, in order to, again, break up that duopoly, if that's the goal?
Sure. Well, I mean, does the ideology accord with your own views? The American Solidarity Party has positions that I think are very consistent with a large swath of the American electorate. We tend to be a little bit left of center on what I'll call economic issues. We might be perceived as being a little bit right of center on social issues, but we're very much centrist. We don't, I mean, when I was younger, I talked about when I first started voting, it used to be that at the time of an election, the two parties would kind of bend toward the center in order to appease the larger middle that were not perhaps affiliated with either one of the two parties. What's happened in recent years is it's gone this way, and they've gone to more polar opposite extremes, and they're fragmenting that middle. They're breaking it apart and trying to bring a large component of it in their extreme direction. And it's breaking up society when there's still a lot of people that don't agree completely with either of the parties in totality. So I would invite people to look at the platform for the ASP. I've shared a lot of views tonight. If what you heard from me is something that you found appealing, something that resonates with your own way of thinking, look more deeply at our platform, because I'm not sharing with you anything that is unique to me. This is, as I shared with you at the outset, I found the ASP and it fit me like a glove. And I'm just sharing with you the views that so many others in our party have compiled in the form of a platform. But I think the larger issue is just that right now in our time, the duopoly, the two-party system, is not working. You've got one party that is either just barely in the majority and one party that's just barely in the minority, and they are struggling either to keep themselves where they are or to get back on top. And I think that as long as we have a situation like this where their complete focus is on their own agenda, and it's where can we either stay in power or regain power, that's what it's going to be. If you introduce more parties, at least one additional party, and have a coalition government, now nobody has a majority. Nobody can get a piece of legislation passed without working across the aisle. So if Marcus, you're the Republicans, and Aaron, you're the Democrats, and I'm the ASP, and we have 35% and 35% and 30%, there's no way for any of us to be able to enact a piece of legislation that requires 50% of the vote in the House or 60 votes in the Senate unless we work together, unless we find mutual ways and come to some sort of common sense agreement. I think that there's merit and benefit in this, and it could be a successful form of government.
Yeah,
a coalition government.
I was just talking with somebody the other day. in the idea that not even actually half of the population votes,
Mhm.
and of the in the country as a whole. And so we get caught up so often in those, everything is so close, like you said, but in reality we're only going off of like 40-45% of the country. And I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people are turned off from voting because of they're just turned off by only the two parties. That's all they see. They don't see anything changing, and why should I even waste my time?
Well, Aaron,
And
have you heard, on the other hand, people saying if you vote for a third party, you're wasting your vote?
Mhm.
well, I was going to actually rephrase that and say I was just told the other day, that if you're voting for the third party, you're voting for the Democrats or Republicans. So in other words, if I was if because I would be a
Sure.
generally I would vote Republican. So if I'm voting for you, then I just gave a vote to Biden.
Yeah, I understand that. And I think that
Yeah.
people look at it that way, and they can spin it both ways. I mean, some people could
Mhm.
say because the ASP is a very pro-life party that voting for them is taking a vote away from the Republicans. And some could say because the ASP stands very strongly for protection of the environment or immigration reform or support of labor unions, that you're voting for the ASP means you're stealing a vote from the Democrats. Well, the reality is, I think if the people you mentioned, the disaffected voters that are not voting, they're the people that are wasting their votes because they are not letting their voices be heard.
Right.
So if you're voting for something in which you believe, even if it's voting for a third party, then I think that you are expressing your will. And at the end of the day, you can look at the hundreds of thousands of votes that were cast for the red and the hundreds of thousands of votes that were cast for the blue, or millions if you want to talk about it in terms of a national count. But the reality is, maybe it's the tens of thousands of votes that go to the Greens or the Libertarians or the ASP or the Constitution Party or whatever, that
Mhm.
people look at and say, wow, what do those people know that voted for that candidate that I don't know? I think that there is something that people are missing when they're only hearing the argument of the two parties. And I don't think the media helps us because they don't acknowledge the voices of the third parties, and they certainly are not welcome on the stage when debates are taking place. So,
Right.
we need to struggle. Look, for me to be elected, fellas, I'm going to have to go to as many states as I possibly can and petition my way onto the ballot so that my name can appear on the ballot written like it does for Republican candidate, like it does for Democratic candidate,
Right.
like it does for, whoever else is on the ballot there, whether it's Green or Libertarian or what have you. And that's a tall order. In
Yep.
some states, it's maybe 500 signatures that you need, but in some states, it's like 12 or 15,000 signatures that you need. It seems like, oh, well, that's no big deal, but they give you a small window of time in which to get it.
Hmm.
And, to be able to find people to solicit these signatures, to compile them, and submit them in a way that's required is a challenge if you're unfamiliar with it. So you largely have to go out and hire professional signature gatherers in order to do it. So
Hmm.
it's a tall order, and I hope that I'm able to get on as many ballots as a listed candidate as possible. The reality is I probably will be in at least half of the states as only a write-in candidate. And then I have to rely on people to remember my name and to go in and fill out the ballot in that way
Yeah.
when they get there.
Right.
I'm not sure I answered your question completely,
No,
but
that was good. That was good.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so before we wrap up and give you a chance to, again, pitch why people should end up voting for you, let me ask you this. Obviously, you have your running mate already selected, Lauren Onak. Could you tell us a little bit about her? And I did read that she's a stay-at-home mom of three.
Mhm.
So what makes a stay-at-home mom of three want to get into the vice presidential slot?
Because she's really passionate about the changing the way that America is going, and she's one smart lady. She is a stay-at-home mom of three, but she's educated as a professional educator, and she has taught. Her husband, in fact, is a professor. He teaches computer science at a public university, no, a private university. Lauren has a let's see, her bachelor's is summa cum laude from Columbia, an Ivy League school, so she's a smart person. And she's very dedicated to the principles of the ASP. She's a millennial. She's a young person like yourselves, not an old baby boomer like me, and has a great deal of concern for her generation and wants to be a spokesperson for that generation. She wants to be a spokesperson for women too, because she feels as though women are getting treated in ways that are inappropriate. And I agree and respect with that opinion. So she's just penned a couple of wonderful observations about maternal health. There are there's a lot of concern these days with maternal health, especially in the Black population. There's been a lot of deaths both during pregnancy and postpartum for Black mothers, and it's a crisis that we should be able to address more efficiently than we have. And so she just wrote a wonderful two-part blog article on that. Go to petersonsky.com and you can find those articles. But there are issues simply that are not being addressed that are where the rubber meets the road. And Erin is the type of person that really has a passion for that. What is affecting you in your household, in your family, and how can we address these issues? Because the problem, fellas, and if I can kind of segue now into why to vote for me, I would say is that if you look at the two-party system, you can see that there is an elite class in both of the parties. There is a donor class that governs the party. You'll find that elected officials in either party now are being screened such to the point that if they are not in lockstep with the agenda of the party, that they are either being dismissed as potential candidates, or if they are elected officials themselves, the party's primarying other challengers against them to get them out of office because they want people who are going to be in total acceptance and support of the ideology of the party. It's not in the days, where you had the blue dog Democrats that were, the more conservative Democrats, or kind of the moderate Republicans who had more of a liberal either social or fiscal agenda. No, those days are gone. They want the people that are really staying closer to the poles, the extremes on the spectrum. And I don't think the public is being adequately represented. It's the donor class that's getting what they want, whether it's the special interests on the left or the right. They're getting their special treatment, and the party leadership and the party elected officials, and then whatever manages to come down may benefit you and I. But the reality is the two-party system is not working for us. It's working for them. And I think that we need to change that. We said at the beginning of the party, I'm just an average guy. I'm not a career politician. Yes, I've been an elected official. I've held 3 different offices on a local level, so I've got some experience with it. But I don't consider myself a career politician. I have a 9-to-5 job, and so that's where I earn my living, and that's where I invest my my attention, every day, Monday through Friday. But I'm at a point where I'm frustrated with where we are headed, and the prospects of a repeat election from 2020 really not only frustrates me but frightens me, because it means that we can't, as a society, move on from what we largely agree was one of the worst options that we've had in the history of the United States. So, look, it's a tall order. It's nearly a miraculous situation that would allow me to be elected. But if I can bring concerns and policy issues forward that matter to people and hopefully force them to become the subject of discussion and debate, that's a win for me. If I can introduce more people to the notion that a coalition government, a government that is not exclusively two parties, can be more effective than a two-party system, that's a win for me.
Yeah.
I certainly ask for your listeners' support. I would love for them to go into the voting booth and to check Lauren Onak and Peter Sonski off as their choice for vice president and president, respectively. But at the same time, I know that the prospects of that being enough people to get me over the finish line are slim. But damn it, if I don't feel that it's important to at least bring the message forward that alternatives are viable, and I think alternatives are essential at this state of the history of the United States.
Yeah, that's good.
Definitely.
Well, Peter, I mean, we can't thank you enough for giving us this time and sharing, your views, who you are with us, with our viewers. Thank you for your time. And
before we leave, plug how people can find you, find the party.
Sure.
Look up things.
Thank you. PeterSonsky.com is the website. PeterSonsky.com. You can find me on Facebook. I have a Facebook page, which I think is Peter Sonski 2024. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I'm on what else am I on? I'm on Threads. Hey, how about that? So, there are plenty of ways. And the American Solidarity Party, solidarity-party.org. Solidarity-party.org. Look that up too. You can find the platform there. I would welcome your support financially. I welcome your support. I mean, I'm trying to earn as many funds as I possibly can in order to secure those ballot access requirements that I told you about. But it also allows me to do a little bit of travel and to be able to take the message to people in different places of the country to promote the ASP. So I'm very grateful to you fellas for the invitation to visit with you and your audience. I'm very grateful for the faithful perspective that you bring to your podcast and a willingness to be open to ideas of improvement for our nation and its people. I don't profess to hold the only answers, but I do profess to hold some what I consider to be better answers than what the two-party system is offering us.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Awesome.
Well, thank you for that. We appreciate those kind words as well. And we hope you have a good rest of your night.
Thank you, sir.
God bless you.
God bless you.